Finnskog som skal si hei, og ønsker alle sammen velkommen, både til våre speakers I dag, og også til dere som ser på. Det jo litt utfordrende og ganske sånn utmattende tider akkurat nå, og denne uka her så kjemper jo vi for, ikke minst for de svarte sine rettigheter, men vi kjemper jo også for at musikknæringen skal overleve korona. Vi kjemper jo litt for at Trump skal bli avsatt, og også for at vår egen kulturminister skal lytte til musikknæringen. Det ikke bare tøft å manøvrere og orientere seg I en evig strøm av nyheter. Det jo tøft å ta inn alle inntrykkene. Det vanskeligere å ta valg. Det komplisert å balansere alle mulighetene som man har, og utfordringene virker litt sånn uendelige. Så akkurat denne uka her så har vi betimelig nok 70 internasjonal PR på agendaen. Og hvordan kan du formidle din historie på en best mulig måte? Internasjonal musikkmedia også I stor endring, og det et stort valg av plattformer, å definere målgrupper og formidle en historie som skaper engasjement. Det jo komplekst nok I seg selv. Og før du begynner, så må du også vite kanskje hvem du skal snakke med. Bare å finne frem til deg kan jo være komplisert. Vi samlet et knippe veldig, veldig fine kandidater her I dag, og som vi blitt kjent med på våre turer rundt omkring I verden. Hvis du lurer på også hvordan du kan finne PR-agenter og PR-byrå, så kan jo det også være smart å snakke med noen I Music Norway. Du skal jo få møte Kitty Atlas fra UK, du skal få møte Inge Colsen fra New York og Sven Städtler fra Berlin, som alle har gjort store internasjonale pressekampanjer fra alt fra Pussy Riot til Bon Iver til Øyafestivalen. Og så jo det også noen I det her landet som stødig på PR, så jeg veldig glad for at det Chalrotte Öquist som skal moderere denne samtalen og lede oss gjennom det. Du leder jo nå PR- og kommunikasjonsavdelingen I ACT. Så hvis du ikke finner frem til noen internasjonale, hvis du lurer på hvem Music Norway du skal ringe, så kan du også ta en prat med veldig mange fine, erfarne norske bransjefolk. 4 helt fabelaktige folk. Charlotte, du skal få straks ta over. Jeg skal hoppe av skjermen og sette meg ned og lytte. Gleder meg. Du skal jo få introdusere panelet, og også deg selv. Så ønsker jeg bare alle en fin ettermiddag, and enjoy the rest of the session, guys. See you later.
Thanks, Katrine. Welcome to this webinar. This is very exciting to have you guys here. Katrine introduced you a bit in Norwegian. I don't know if it was only good words, not everyone. I think that everyone knows that this has been a very special week. We were scheduled to do this meeting on Tuesday, and we moved it on to Thursday due to the blackout Tuesday. So I would just like to, it feels weird not to address this, so maybe if you have any comments on this special week and how that's affected you guys.
Hello, my name is Inge, and I do live in New York, and out of the panel, I am, let's say, immersed in what people are addressing, but also I want to be sure and aware that it's hard to make a change overnight, and like a Blackout Tuesday, that where the whole music industry participated is only a very small part of the changes we need to do and how we perceive the changes that need to happen. We cannot just leave it at one day, and we don't have all the answers of what we need to do as next steps to include the Black people in America, but around the world, to give them better opportunities that have been denied, and the racial injustice that is happening, especially in America. It just needs a lot more time than this week. But I just wanted to make sure that we address it, and you know, like, because it's part of, you know, what we do in our business. Like, for instance, I don't feel as comfortable, you know, yesterday and today and like this week to go out and promote, you know, non-Black music. I have to be honest, you know, because like that's what America especially is all focused on right now. So it's like a part of like what my business is about. And also I have racially diverse clients, but not Black Americans. So just, I have to be honest and open about that. So that's my take.
Yes. Yeah, thanks. It was important to just address that, because PR is obviously a lot about storytelling. So not only do we have this happening right now, the unavoidable thing to say is also we have a huge pandemic going on, which I assume has affected your work very much. What are the biggest shifts and changes you've seen in your working area right now, post-COVID?
Well, hi, I'm Kitty. I'm currently in London. So yeah, I suppose I can speak on behalf of the UK media landscape. I mean, yeah, the impact has been huge, really. I think on a practical level, particularly music press, it's been really badly affected. You know, they largely rely on advertisers such as, well, recently it's been music festivals. So a lot of magazines such as Loud and Quiet, Crack Magazine, DIY, Mix Mag, DJ Mag, you know, Q Magazine, from kind of independent to very established titles. They're all facing challenges, and without advertising, of course, they can't sustain themselves. So actually what's happening here is most print music press certainly is on hiatus. Staff have been furloughed. So yes, it's, you know, practically a very challenging time from the kind of publication side. But I think it's also, you know, an interesting time, and the circumstances are forcing artists certainly to adapt and be innovative, whether that's through, you know, in the live sphere, people are experimenting with live streaming or pay-per-view concerts. So an artist called Laura Marling, she did one recently where, you know, you paid the equivalent of a ticket price to stream her concert. And then, yeah, you have artists like Charlie XCX, who she's just released an album that was created completely in lockdown. And she says, actually, that's, you know, she's no longer going to follow the kind of traditional blueprint that's A&R and timelines and labels and playing the game with the, you know, DSPs to make sure that the album is more impactful. For her, it's more, you know, she's embracing the spontaneity. So, you know, it has largely been negative, I'd say, the impacts, but there are interesting things to come from it.
So, yeah, Inge?
Oh yeah, I think because Sven, his sound is off. I want to add to that. Yeah, thank you so much, Kitty. You know, it's definitely creating new opportunities, because these days I see then that, you know, artists from the UK get, you know, a Zoom type interview, you know, on the YouTube platform of the publication, which, you know, it would have before not happened, and or at least, you know, like it not as often. And now the publications are embracing the video and the, you know, the Instagram lives, so that the distance that used to be there is not an issue right now. Of course, you cannot take away the human, you know, connect and, like, you know, what it is for people to be in the same room. But if you are, you know, constrained by distance, so like what the, you know, Norwegian people, for instance, are, you know, to come to America and deal with visas, this is an opportunity. This is a way to connect on a cost-effective level, and you know, so like just like focus on like what is possible in these days instead of all the things that are not possible, which is quite a bit. Yeah, it's way bad out there, but try to be positive and see what you can do on how to connect. And even like if it's like quite a quick message to a writer on, you know, Twitter, like as a label, for instance, like there are people that are still interested to connect, and maybe this is, let's say, the excuse to just, you know, connect with somebody more directly instead of going through the blueprint, as Katie said.
I think, Sven, is there anything you'd like to add to this?
We've basically seen both sides as well. On one side, media really struggling, not only the music publications, but also more general newspapers where staff is on just working short time, where editorial pages, especially in the cultural sector, have been cut. But also opportunities, how to deal with this new situation. Radio, for example, that were always demanding a face-to-face, high-quality audio recording. They have agreed to do different types of interviews, different formats of interviews. They actually, I think, have benefited as people turned more back to radio as well. So yeah, we've seen both things, and I agree. We have to see the positive and have to see what opportunities can be generated from this. But also I think it will be a very, very difficult time, especially for printed music magazines in the next couple of months, because I think some of the changes that now have been made, they are not going to be turned back. I don't think that a lot of people will go back to classic. So I think that it'll be a long struggle for them, at least here in Germany, from what we can see for now.
So yeah, so we're just touching in the media outlets and the struggling and also the new opportunities, obviously, that we get with COVID. So that is, but we're here to talk about the story also, to present it to these media outlets. So I was thinking, how is, when you start working with artists, and how do you find those stories? How's your work with finding out, and why is it so important to have a genuine story? Why isn't music enough?
I think from a PR perspective, it's, you know, really important to have a story, as it makes copy more interesting to read. I'm sure we will touch on different formats and social media and how that's kind of creating direct lines into the lives of artists. But I think that, you know, journalism is always authoritative and needed. And great quotes are always going to be needed for, you know, magazine covers or clickbait or whatever your chosen format is. So yeah, I mean, I think as well, we're in this age of authenticity, and stories are very humanizing. You know, fans can relate so much more to an artist if they're kind of presented as these fully formed humans and that go through the kind of same processes and struggles as they do. And I think it makes that connection with fans a lot more meaningful when there's that shared ground.
Inge, would you like to add something?
Yes. Like, of course, the song has to be the base. Like, as in, the music has to be good and perfect and relatable, and has to grab people emotionally. But the story, like how you as an individual or as a band group, you know, are in the world, is very important, because that's what make you, you know, like we say, like genuine, you know, unique, you know, like why do people want to be friends with you? Why do people want to know more about you? And to me, it's always like the journalist they get so many, like bands, like music thrown at them. But if something sticks out, like an interesting, like even a hobby of an artist, or of course a platform, a philosophy that they can then relate to, that's one step. Like they get more intrigued and like do a double take, like, hey, oh, this is interesting, let me find out more about this artist. That's how the spark has to start. And then with that message, the journalist needs to sort of succinctly be able to convey it to his or her editor, because they are the ones that then give the go ahead for the story, like, so. And it's a trajectory, but once you have formed like the interesting parts about yourself as a band or a musician or a label even, and like if you're able to tell it well in a beautiful story. And it could be like, I remember like in the beginning with Boys Noise, like he, for instance, out of Berlin, he, for instance, was so proud the way he told his story of like how he started his record label with his first own album on the kitchen table, and the release of the album was in like the release party was like going through a like a falafel shop, and you had to go through it, and then there was a secret place in the back where you could have the party. I don't know, to me it's a visual story. It's like trying to really embrace like what this artist is about. He doesn't want to be flash in front of everybody. He wants to be down in through the hole, and you gotta find it. It's for you. So I mean, this is a very tiny example, but to me that resonated, and I found that journalists were like intrigued by it too. And there's like many small items that you can try and think of, and maybe talk to your friends and like what your friends find interesting about what you do, so to form the story. That's my take.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it's a lot about identification as well. I think that Boys Noise story is a good example. It's like, because you can just follow his story, it's kind of like allows you to identify more with the artist as well. So I think that's very, very important. And on the media side, I think the story you tell is also important to put it in a cultural context, because that always, for editors, is also interesting as well, how to just tell more than just the music and just how it's been recorded, but also what references are important, what kind of band are we actually talking about, how did they grow up with music, how did they learn their instruments, all that background tied together can make a good story. I think also what also is important is it has to be kind of like a true story. I think there can also be artists that don't have a story at all, and that's also fine. So I think by making it up, it doesn't necessarily get better. So it has to really be an authentic, true story that brings you close as a fan, and as a journalist brings you closer to the band, to the individuals behind it.
Yeah, Inge.
I would like to add, of course, like the story like is what, let's say, the initiation where it starts, but to me it's always important to bring the journalists on the ride of the story, like, and that's how you get, you give the journalist, let's say, a week notice of something happening, and like, like, of course it's about a conversation that you have with him or her, and the story develops. And like the ideal way is to create momentum, like where you are taking the journalist on the ride to, both, like, at least, like, I'm not saying like, oh, then the next day the journalist is going to write about it, but at least he or she feels ownership over, and like that he feels or she feels trusted to get along on the ride of this artist or a group, so that in in a year's time or in like 6 months time, like the story will be then published, you know, for more people to read. And that's like with a starting band, obviously. And then sometimes also with a more established artist, like for instance, Christine and the Queens, like she is a perfect storyteller and then she is so engaging. And, you know, then you could say like, oh, and the story writes itself, you know, do we still need a publicist? But to me, it's our job, the publicist and the job to bring the journalist along and like a little bit ahead of what's to come, so that they feel ownership and get like a bigger picture story, you know, come through, then instead of them just looking at her social media. That's what I want to add.
Yeah.
I think as well that, you know, artists are increasingly becoming mouthpieces for social issues. Not all, of course, but you know, there's a certain degree of responsibility, be it, you know, mental health or sexuality or class commentary, and you know, these themes can only really be explored, of course, through music. But you know, your example of Boys Noise is a good one, because not all artists have lyrics, and you know, it can be much more open to interpretation. So I think to have a story that you can, yeah, like you say, communicate with journalists alongside that kind of base level of the music is really important.
So where would you say that the story starts? Would it come from, because we're talking a lot about also going through an editor, which is still very important, but we have, maybe there's also a situation where you can use your own channels, obviously social media. How important is that nowadays? And how do you tell your story nowadays, where we have the social media tools, where maybe it's a different market? If that makes sense.
I think it's on both ways. It's either through the artists themselves, as well as through a PR side. I think it's totally important to be active as an artist, use your own channels, be as close as possible. But also that can be quite like one-dimensional. So I think it is important media perspective to that, and to have a reach, but also media the story, because you want to reach people out of your own channels. You want to reach more, and as I said earlier, you want to get the cultural context as well. And I think that media can still bring that and add that to the storytelling of an artist. So I think both have to go alongside of each other or next to each other, and so I think it's still important to have media on board. And when to start the storytelling in the direction to media, I think that really depends. It can be very different. It can be from the very beginning. It can be after a certain amount of time when the artist has already started growing or started building a fan base. I think that really you have to look at individually and decide very carefully when it is a good moment to add PR.
Mm-hmm. Okay, for me, I don't know, like what, like how does one build their own story? Like sometimes it's like, as like, let's say maybe it starts with like a visual, maybe like things like what are close to you, like what do you share, you know, as an artist, what do you share with your friends, like what, you know, because like I always feel like first look around the little world, you know, like sort of like the community around you. What do you guys value in your community? And if you can, let's say, translate that onto your socials, then that's like sort of the start of the story. And, you know, it goes through visuals, of course, text, and like sometimes people do, you know, video, you know, like a little video message. But of course, again, the music is the core. So that's, let's say, what you should very relate to the music, ideally. Does that answer the question a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. But it would be, Kitty, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with what Sven, you were saying about, you know, social media creating bubbles. So I think on a practical level, you know, how do you tell your story? Of course, the subject matter has to come from an authentic place and be communicated in the right way. But I think being creative with it is important as well. And, you know, making sure that you aren't sticking to one platform. I suppose it's understanding, you know, where your fans are, and to some degree working backwards from there. So working out what their habits are and what platforms they're using. And certainly I think the artists that do well are the ones that kind of had this more like, I don't know, multi-platform approach. Because I think, yeah, you know, here in the UK, it's really important to be on the cover of like The Guardian, G2, or the Sunday Times Culture magazine. You know, these things are very important in the kind of ecosystem of the artist, because they are used for, you know, to sell your music to Spotify or to position you on a festival billing. But it might not be that the people that you really want to speak to with your artists are, you know, reading the Times, which I suppose is like a traditionally right wing, like probably read by like a slightly older demographic. So yeah, I think, you know, using all the different media that are available to tell your story in different ways is important as well.
Yeah. So it would be interesting to know, like, when you build a PR campaign, what are from A to how do you start? Where do you start? And do you have any examples of like a truly successful international, perhaps, campaign that you've been a part of?
I always think that there has to be an urgency, like a need for people to want to know more, right? But how do you build that? And like maybe two examples, like one, like my work with Pussy Riot, which is definitely international. That has, you know, like I'll touch on it in a second, but first, like, and then the other side is like a starting band, which I love working with, you know, or a starting artist, because you have to, you know, sort of behind the scenes, I feel, and maybe everybody does PR differently, right? But for me, I love working behind the scenes, like for at least 2 months, on and introducing the artist into the world of the journalists, because yeah, they're going to be the mouthpieces, the ambassadors that are going to bring it to a bigger platform. And yeah, in the meantime, the artist does their thing on their socials. Maybe like one song has come out, but you know, like that song has not, let's say, been pushed by me actively, like, hey, can you write about this? No, not yet. I would love to create a little, you know, if I know that like 5-10 journalists that are critical, that are into it, I'm like, okay, now we're having a bit of a, you know, of a moment where I can try to, you know, flip it, you know, switch, and like for them to then, you know, start writing. So then I'm like, okay, you know, like label, like manager, like let's go. And of course they are all doing their parts too. It's also the radio, and in America things are very divided, you know, so there's a radio people, there are like people for that deal with music supervisors. So we have to all combine. But from the PR side, I want to go when I know that there's definitely a few people that are key in the development that could then start writing. And then from there on, you know, you go back to other people that are maybe bigger, or, you know, like have other platforms that can then go like, hey, so this X, Y, and Z wrote about this song of a very new artist, and in 2 months he's gonna do another song, and like just then you can, you know, bring more people in. So to just like spread the story. So like that's like in a maybe nutshell of like what I would do with a smaller starting artist. And then like for the PR for like Pussy Riot, of course the urgency was right there. Like these, you know, people were gonna go to jail, and beforehand we made sure that everybody, you know, of course they got a lot of support from like a Paul McCartney and Madonna. So like, okay, that's a whole different PR setup. But I think in my experience, it was like how to channel it into that people kept being active, you know, like that they took it serious, like, and that, you know, like, yeah, the Garden has been the biggest, you know, supporter, and you know, of course, the New York Times, but like, so there's a lot of different people that wanted to rally. That's another thing. You want to get people to want to rally with you, for you. And, you know, as a smaller band, you want to have people become your friend, you know, like you want to like get people support. So, but with Pussy Riot, for instance, a very fun example was when they did get out of jail, and then Nadia Masha, like, had like a secret meeting with Assange. But so I went with them to the UK, and we didn't tell anybody. We didn't tell the press that they were coming. But then all of a sudden I said, okay, to everybody, okay, let's meet like around 1 o'clock at Harrods. And then, you know, little did they know that they were going to meet up with Assange, which a block away. And then all of a sudden, after they, you know, right before we went into the embassy, I said, okay, they're meeting with Assange, meet you later. So then all of a sudden the press was all there when we came out. So that's like how you create, you know, an opportunity. Like, you know, like again, you have to sort of gather people and then tell them, okay, now let's start. Now let's go. So that was how I try to do things. But
well, I think our approach is similar to when it comes to a new artist. Yeah, decide when it is good to jump on board and allow to the artist to naturally grow and build a fan base. I think that's a similar approach, and while that happens, try to see what kind of media might be interested, who can I fill in at a very early stage and get on board very early as a supporter. So I think that's a similar approach, and then there has to be that one point that all involved decides together, okay, now is the time to turn the switch, and everyone is active. And as you outlined, there are so many various things to keep in mind: DSPs, other PRs, live plans, all that stuff. They all rely on each other. So to coordinate what everyone needs at what point, I think that has become it's a very technical approach now, but that has become very, very important as well. It's just like there are so many things to consider in your PR plan as well, or in the overall strategy. Yeah, that these have also to be carefully monitored. So that's from a very, as I said, technical approach to when and how to work on a new artist. Also with the more established artists, I also agree it's a totally different approach, because there's already a foundation. People want to talk to somebody, so it's more or less who actually do I want to have at which point. And I think we also act similar to that, is find your supporters and then, yeah, roll it out.
From a, well, non-artist, so as well as artists, I work with festivals, as you said, such as Oya and, you know, We Love Green in Paris, and I also work with brands such as YouTube, and I think, you know, with them, it's the principles are of course the same, of, you know, making sure that the timing is right, but I think it's an interesting example to bring up because it's more also about wider context. And so, you know, with something like Oya, for example, you know, it's picking up out the kind of temperature of what's going on in the wider culture. So for example, you know, Oya's always been a market leader in sustainability issues, and although this is, you know, I've worked with them for about 10 years now, and although this is something we've always talked about, it's really come to the forefront of, you know, the British media and consciousness, and certainly a lot of focus is going into that. So similarly, you know, gender neutral or gender equal, sorry, I should say, lineups where it's like balanced male and female, that's something that again is, you know, has been doing for years, but it's only really recently kind of become, you know, a topic that journalists are interested in covering. So it's about being ready with the stories and knowing what the kind of demand and the interest is from journalists, and meeting that where possible, I think is important as well.
Yeah, I have a question also, because I understand that you all work for like independent agencies. There's not a major label connection here. So what's your experience? What are the pros? And also, sorry, artists, when they come to smaller companies, maybe you have a smaller team. What are the pros and cons of being independent and perhaps having those, yeah, from a PR perspective?
In my eyes, the pros are the, you know, easier connection with the people that work with you on the project. I would say, as a small company, you have the luxury to pick and choose which artists you work with. At a label, you know, like I've been at a label too, where, you know, you just get to work with the people that are signed, and it might not be your first, you know, cup of tea, but you have to do it, you know. And like, I'm not saying that the PR people at the label don't do a good job, you know, not at all, but more like, you know, like it's like, as an individual company, you can go and need to go the extra mile to really bring the core of the artists that you work with to the forefront. And as a record label, you know, like for instance, the pro of a record label is like, okay, the radio people say this and this and this. It's very quickly, you know, you get like very close to, you know, what the whole company is about, you know, like establishing for the artist. So you can easily get the information. Oh, and of course, you know, as a small label, you get the information quickly too. But, you know, like there's like weekly meetings with the record company that maybe get, you know, if things go well, then like the PR can like maybe like increase quickly, more quickly with a bigger label, because they have also bigger artists that they take care of. So they can say, okay, well, the big artist is doing this. What about the smaller upcoming artist? You know, like they, I'm sure, use that a little bit more than as a indie PR. Those are my takes.
Do you mean sort of leveraging artists?
Leveraging is the word.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I don't know, I suppose I'm biased, but I have also worked at bigger agencies, and, you know, when you aren't so kind of, well, firstly, when you don't have to work on things that you're not passionate about, it makes a huge difference as being kind of small and independent. But also, I think, you know, some agencies you can end up, I don't know, it might be like the artist thinks that one person is working on it, but actually they're preoccupied with other clients. And so, you know, you can almost be like passed around and have people within an agency that aren't as kind of passionate working on artists and clients. So yeah, I think with independence, it's kind of much more personal. There's a real kind of connection there that you wouldn't otherwise have so much.
Anything you'd like to add, Sven, to that topic?
hardly anything to add. I agree to everything that's been said. I think there are pros and cons to both, but yeah, independent PR. Yeah, we are passionate about what we do, and we choose what we do, and we can't say no if there is a project where we think it's not a good fit to the company, or where we don't stand 100% behind it. So I think that's one of the main advantages working with independent PR.
Yeah, I want to add about the leveraging, right? Because like it does happen, but it does happen, like as an indie, it's really it doesn't feel correct to leverage clients, because they're all very close, like and definitely like thinking about like let's say when everybody wants to talk to Nadia from Pussy Riot, I can easily say, oh yes, let's do it, and then you also do X, Y, and Z, please. But that doesn't work in the indie world, because in my heart, because I don't want to put the other client in a bad scenario. I want the best for each client. And I think with the record label, they have, it's like part of the business. It's like more of a, you sign up with the major, like, and it's, you use like the grease of, like leverage, there easily. That's what I wanted to add.
Great. Yeah, I think being signed by you guys, meaning that you have a passionate PR agent. So yeah, I think we've been through most of it, and I can see that we have a question. If you guys are ready for that. So I think I'm just going to read it out loud, and then we'll see how we start. How should artists go forward when trying to gain attention to their story when there is nothing particularly special about it? How can I find the angle or story that is interesting in a PR perspective? It's interesting. So I guess the helping hand, how do you find that story for someone?
Well, I would say sometimes, well, if there's nothing particularly special about it, like how do you introduce what you do and what you have been trying to do to a friend or a like somebody who's closer to you? Like you say something about your project, like you have to sort of have a lot of conversations and try to find what is special about it. And then if, let's say, if it's like a produced, like let's say like an anonymous producer, makes a song, so there's no story, let's say, that wants to come out, like that, there's no like, oh, Tom produced it. No, it's just anonymous. Then maybe there's a way to look at, oh, like the song has been streamed on YouTube so many times, or like, Spotify has like supported it. Like then you have like tiny little nuggets that you try and distill. Like there has to be, a little nugget that is possible to grow from. And like, in my opinion, then I would tell, the writer, like, hey, this is a small nugget, but like, look, like the song is amazing and there is some traction, and like, that's how you start. Like, but you present it by prefacing, it's small, but here we go, we're starting. That's like how I think that you can find an angle or story that's interesting. I don't know. Does that help?
I think it. Yeah, I think it does, and I think it's try to find different perspectives. Sometimes the story might be there, but you just don't see it because you're so deeply involved in your music, in your project, that you actually don't see bits and pieces lying around that actually make up for a story or are a story. So yeah, adding, maybe get what we often do for Germany, for example, is when we work for international artists, we get a German journalist, editor on board to write a specific text for Germany, just because sometimes these conversations, they open up new angles, new perspectives, and then suddenly they bring something that could end up in a story or start a story, or it's adding more to the story. So I think, yeah, it's new perspectives, get feedback, try to reflect on things, and then there may be a story. Maybe there isn't as well, and that's also fine. And then you have to just see what can we do with all the available assets we have, and how can we maybe make a non-existing story be in a story in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, to that point, I think you're absolutely right. And, you know, if the music and the personality and the themes aren't kind of enough to create that story, it's maybe looking at exciting visual artists that you could partner with to create, you know, visuals or videos. You know, is there like a buzzy director? You know, looking, yeah, like you say, a bit outside of the immediate field. But I think your point is a really good one of getting, you know, as well as kind of official feedback, to have a few journalists that you really trust, and kind of off record you can say, you know, have a listen, let me know what you think, or like you say, get them to write the biography. So I have a couple of trusted writers that are friends, and I know that they're really good at, you know, before the campaign begins, when you're putting together the press pack and the biography, you approach them, and they have you know, that journalist's kind of intuition, and they can really dig out the story often.
Thanks. I think that was very informative. Great. Let me see if we have any questions. Music Norway, do we? Yeah. So yeah, I think, is there anything you feel like you'd like to add to this conversation that we had? I think it was really great, and I've learned a lot.
Yeah, I think maybe I want to add to what Kitty said, that like the visuals are way more important these days. So if you can partner up with, yeah, like a you know, up and coming you know, photographer, or like a videographer, like, you know, like if people recognize a name, they're like, oh well, let me see what, you know, Paul does now, or like, you know, like the photographer, like who has shot for, let's say, a magazine, maybe if you can connect with him and her, so that there's like a connection that then can be, you know, made broader. It's like, you know, like it's like sort of like gathering like names and people with, you know, like the art and voices that are trusted, that then like support you, that like, you know, can help you go into that direction. And, you know, that's like, it's called talking points, you know, like, okay, the artist has done XYZ. So for instance, partner with this photographer, you know, this person mixed or produced the music. They actually toured and opened up for this artist, you know, things like little nuggets. And well, these are actually like nice nuggets, you know, like, so it's just like, what do you want to write home about? What are you able to write home about? Like, you know, if you can say to, you know, to be proud, like you can tell your friend like, oh, I'm hanging, you know, like with this photographer and he wants to, like, you know, do a photo shoot for us. Like that's probably something that is also worth saying, you know, towards a journalist. And like, yeah, like it's always finesse, you know, like it's not like you cannot, you know, like if this band has the same photographer, it's not exactly the same result as if another band does it. I don't know. It's always like it has to have the connection that makes sense.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know how you see it, Inge and Kitty, but maybe we can agree that a story is more than just what's been written down and what you tell. The story is also about the whole, your whole environment, the whole context you are within, like the visuals, the artwork, the photos. All that is part of the story that you tell as a band. It's not only the biography or the press release, so there's much more than this. The live shows, they are also part of the overall, let's call it artist image or artist story. So if you are, if it's difficult to find a good story to write down, there are multiple angles and multiple options to work on your story and your artist identity as well, which can then lead up to talking points for media. So I think it's, I think it's, as I said very, very early, don't make up a story that actually has no foundation. Rather be very honest in when you analyze, do we have a story, and say, actually, no, we don't have a story. But what else have we as an artist that makes us unique or makes us special? Or where can we be creative in art in different ways to have that story?
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe there's an upcoming Norwegian clothing designer, like, or maybe like a, I don't know, like a chair, like a furniture designer, and then you are in the picture with, like with the furniture piece. Like, this is like going far, but like that's how I would say you have to try and think. Like, okay, what can be of interest to a third party and that they can run away with? And yes, like, so the music is the base and the core, but the persona, like who you are and who you hang out with, let's say, what world you create around you, that can be that's very important.
I think, my parting advice is also just to, and it sounds a bit PR 101, but often the simplest advice is the best, but, just read as many interviews and watch as many, or, listen to as many podcasts as possible. And you'll know when you're, like ingesting something, whether it's interesting and compelling and makes you want to find out more. So yeah, that would be my parting advice. Just read.
That's a great advice. I think that was it for the questions. It was super interesting and very nice talking to you guys. Thank you for taking your time, both from the US, Germany, and the UK. Again, there are special times we're living in. It was it was exciting to do a webinar. So thanks everyone.
Thank you for having us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So for the next one we have is in a couple of weeks. So we will post information on our website about it. It's the 18th of June. The topic will be mental health. So that's quite important and quite different, I guess, from this one. But I just wanted to say one last time, thank you so much, all of you, for joining. I definitely learned a lot. And it seems like the sky is the limit in terms of creativity. So yeah, that's what I'm taking away from this myself. If you don't have a story, then create one using furniture or a photographer, I guess. I mean, it's great advice. So thank you so much, guys. And thank you everyone for joining, and have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
you.
Bye.
Bye.